Melissa Carter, 35, stared at the email that would change everything. After 12 years of being the family pariah, disowned and forgotten, the truth had finally surfaced. Her sister's decade-long campaign of lies had unraveled in an instant. Now, as Melissa stood outside her parents' home for the first time since that fateful Thanksgiving, she realized sometimes karma doesn't just knock, it kicks down the door. Hey there, I'm so grateful you're joining me for today's story. Before we dive in, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you're enjoying these family drama stories, please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Now, let's get into how my sister's betrayal led to the most unexpected family reunion you could imagine. The Carter family had always been picture perfect, at least on the surface. Growing up in suburban Chicago, Melissa and her younger sister Vanessa were raised to believe family loyalty was sacred. Their parents, Robert and Diana Carter, successful professionals with high expectations, had created a home where appearances mattered above all else. Melissa had always been the responsible one, straight-A student, college scholarships, and a promising career in architectural design. Vanessa, 3 years younger, lived in her shadow, struggling with academics and bouncing between jobs. The sisters' relationship had been strained but functional until Melissa's engagement to James, her college sweetheart. "He's perfect for you," Diana had gushed at the engagement dinner, admiring the modest diamond ring James had saved for months to purchase. That night, Melissa caught Vanessa staring at James with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She brushed it off as her imagination. The wedding planning brought the first clear signs of trouble. Small things disappeared: Melissa's vendor contracts, sample fabric swatches, even her wedding planning notebook. When confronted, Vanessa would tear up. "How could you accuse your own sister? I'm trying to help you." Robert and Diana always took Vanessa's side. "She's sensitive, Melissa. You know that her father would say," his disappointment evident. 2 months before the wedding, Melissa received an anonymous email containing screenshots of text messages between James and Vanessa. The exchanges were flirtatious, suggestive, building over months. The final message from James read, "We need to tell her after the wedding. I can't keep living this lie." Devastated, Melissa confronted James that evening in their apartment. His face paled as she showed him the messages. "These aren't real, Mel. I swear to God I've never sent these." "Stop lying," Melissa had screamed, throwing the engagement ring at him. "My own sister, how could you?" James grabbed his phone. "Look, see for yourself. I've never texted Vanessa anything like this." But when he opened his message history with Vanessa, the evidence was there, word for word matching the screenshots. James looked genuinely shocked. "Someone's hacked my phone. This isn't me, Mel." Melissa's world collapsed. She packed a bag and drove to her parents' house, sobbing as she told them everything. Diana held her while Robert called Vanessa, immediately demanding she come over. When Vanessa arrived, her performance was Oscar-worthy. Tearful confession claims that James had pursued her relentlessly, that she'd been afraid to say anything because she knew how much Melissa loved him. "It started just after they got engaged," she cried. "I tried to stop it, I swear." "Is this true?" Diana asked, her voice breaking. Melissa stood outraged. "None of this is true. She's lying. James wouldn't do this." Robert's face hardened. "The evidence is right there, Melissa. Why would your sister make this up?" "Because she's always been jealous of me. She wants what I have," Melissa shouted, her composure breaking. Vanessa flinched, tears streaming down her face. "See how she treats me. This isn't the first time James and I. There were others before him too. She never forgave me for that high school boyfriend who liked me better." "That's not what happened," Melissa protested, but she could see her parents' expressions changing, doubt creeping in about their eldest daughter. The following week was a nightmare. James tried repeatedly to contact Melissa, insisting on his innocence. When he came to the Carter house, Robert threatened to call the police. The wedding was called off. Deposits, lost explanations made to confuse relatives about irreconcilable differences. Melissa's suspicions about Vanessa grew. She hired a private investigator to examine the text messages, convinced they were fabricated. But before the results came back, Vanessa struck again. Thanksgiving arrived, the family tension palpable as they gathered around the table. As dessert was served, Vanessa cleared her throat. "I need to tell you all something." She looked directly at Melissa. "I'm pregnant, and it's James's baby." The pumpkin pie Diana had been serving crashed to the floor. Robert turned purple with rage, and Melissa felt something inside her break permanently. "You're lying," she whispered. "You've been lying about everything." Vanessa placed a sonogram on the table. "I'm keeping this baby. My niece or nephew deserves to know their father." In that moment, staring at her sister's triumphant expression, thinly veiled behind fake tears, Melissa knew she'd never be able to convince her parents of the truth. The Carter family values appearances, respectability, family unity, had already decided who the villain was in this story. "If you believe this," Melissa said quietly, standing up from the table, "then I have no family." She walked out the door that Thanksgiving night, cutting all contact with the Carters, changing her phone number, and eventually moving to Seattle to rebuild her life from scratch. What Melissa didn't know was that her sister's web of deceit was just beginning to be spun, and it would take 12 long years before the truth would finally set her free. Seattle welcomed Melissa with indifferent rain and the blessed anonymity of a city where no one knew her name or her shame. The first 6 months passed in a fog of grief, not just for James, but for the family who had chosen to believe the worst about her. She rented a tiny studio apartment in Capitol Hill, found work at a small architectural firm, and existed rather than lived. Sleep eluded her most nights. When exhaustion finally pulled her under, she dreamed of confrontations where she finally made her family see the truth, only to wake with tears drying on her pillow. Melissa attempted therapy but found herself unable to fully articulate the betrayal. How do you explain to a stranger that your entire support system crumbled because of a sister's jealousy and parents too rigid to question the perfect narrative? On her birthday, 3 months after the move, Melissa broke down and called home. Diana answered, her voice immediately cooling upon recognizing her daughter. "Vanessa lost the baby," she said without preamble. "The stress you caused her with your accusations triggered a miscarriage." "Mom, there was never a baby," Melissa whispered, but Diana had already hung up. A week later, a cease and desist letter arrived from a Chicago attorney. James had filed for a restraining order claiming harassment. The letter referenced dozens of threatening emails and calls. Melissa had supposedly made all fabrications. When she called the attorney to explain, he coldly informed her that contacting James in any way would result in legal action. Melissa hired her own lawyer, spending money she couldn't afford to investigate what was happening. The findings were devastating. Someone had created email accounts and social media profiles in her name, using them to harass not just James but his family and colleagues. The digital trail led nowhere concrete, but Melissa knew who was behind it. "We can fight this," her lawyer advised, "but it's your word against theirs, and they have evidence, fabricated though it may be." Melissa made the painful decision to let it go. Fighting would mean staying connected to the toxicity. Instead, she disappeared completely, legally changing her surname from Carter to Quinn, deleting all social media, creating a new email account, and focusing entirely on building her career. Years passed. Melissa Quinn rose through the ranks at her firm, eventually becoming a partner at 30. Her professional success stood in stark contrast to her personal life, which remained cautiously isolated. Dating felt dangerous, trust came haltingly. A few relationships started promisingly, but ended when Melissa couldn't bring herself to explain her lack of family, the absence of childhood photos, the gap in her history. Only once did Melissa attempt to learn about her family's life. 5 years after leaving Chicago, she hired another investigator who reported back that Vanessa had indeed married James 14 months after that fateful Thanksgiving. They had 2 children and lived 3 blocks from Robert and Diana in the same affluent neighborhood where the sisters had grown up. James had taken a position in Robert's law firm. The perfect family narrative remained intact with Melissa erased from the picture. The knowledge settled like poison in Melissa's heart. She threw herself even more deeply into work, designed award-winning sustainable buildings, traveled internationally for projects, and built a reputation as brilliant but intensely private. Colleagues respected her boundaries. Friends, the few she allowed close, knew not to ask about family holidays or childhood memories. One such friend, Elaine, became the closest thing to family Melissa had. An interior designer who frequently collaborated with Melissa's firm, Elaine, was divorced with a teenage daughter and a refreshingly straightforward approach to life. "Everyone has secrets," Elaine said once when Melissa deflected yet another question about her past. "But carrying them alone makes them heavier." On a rainy evening 10 years into her Seattle life, after sharing too much wine and completing a challenging project, Melissa finally told Elaine everything. The words poured out like the storm battering the windows: her perfect sister, the fabricated affair, the pregnancy lie, the family that chose appearances over truth. "Jesus," Elaine whispered when Melissa finished. "Have you ever considered that your sister might be a sociopath?" Melissa laughed bitterly. "I've considered every possibility over the years. Does it matter what you call it?" She won. "Only if you let her story be the final chapter," Elaine replied. But Melissa had built a life defined by the absence of her past. She had no interest in reopening wounds that had taken years to scab over, no matter how poorly they had healed. Until exactly 12 years after her exile began, when an email arrived from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "The Truth About Vanessa Carter." The email sat unread in Melissa's inbox for 3 days. The subject line alone had triggered such severe anxiety that she'd called in sick to work, something she hadn't done in years. She alternated between wanting to delete it unread and being desperate to know its contents. What truth could possibly matter after 12 years of silence? On the 4th day, curled up with a weighted blanket and a glass of bourbon for courage, Melissa finally clicked open the message. It was brief: "Miss Quinn, formerly Carter. You don't know me, but I've worked as your father's executive assistant for the past 8 years. I'm leaving the position next month. Before I go, I thought you should know that your sister has been systematically destroying your family for years. The attached files contain evidence I've gathered. Your parents are not well. They deserve to know the truth before it's too late. I'm sorry for being a coward and not coming forward sooner." Alexandra Winters. Attached were dozens of documents, screenshots, audio recordings, scanned letters, financial records. With trembling hands, Melissa began to read. The first file was a series of screenshots showing how Vanessa had used sophisticated spyware to clone James's phone 12 years ago, allowing her to send and delete messages that appeared to come from his number. Another file contained audio of Vanessa bragging to a friend about faking the pregnancy. The sonogram was from Google Images. Can you believe they fell for that? There were financial records showing how over the years, Vanessa had systematically drained their parents' retirement accounts through a series of emergency loans and business investments that never materialized. Medical records indicated that Robert had suffered a minor stroke last year, while Diana had been prescribed increasing doses of anti-anxiety medication. Most damning were the transcripts of conversations between Vanessa and James recorded in their home over the past year. Their marriage was clearly failing, with James frequently mentioning divorce. In one recording, he explicitly referenced Melissa. "Sometimes I think your sister was right about you all along. What if those messages were fake?" What if there was never a baby? To which Vanessa had coldly responded, "Don't be ridiculous. Melissa was unstable. She couldn't handle that you chose me. If you try to contact her or mention these paranoid theories to my parents, I'll take the kids and leave. You'll never see them again. Remember, my father is the reason you have a career." The final document was a medical diagnosis from 6 months ago. Vanessa Carter Taylor had been tentatively diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features after an evaluation mandated by her children's school due to concerning behavioral issues with her oldest child. Melissa read everything twice, emotions cycling between vindication, rage, and profound sadness. The truth she had known all along was laid bare in clinical detail. Her sister wasn't just jealous, she was pathologically manipulative. And her parents, James, even the children, were all victims of Vanessa's elaborate fabrications. With shaking hands, Melissa called Elaine. "I need advice," she said when her friend answered. "And possibly a lawyer." For the next week, Melissa and Elaine meticulously reviewed all the evidence. They consulted with a digital forensics expert who confirmed the authenticity of the electronic records. A lawyer specializing in elder abuse reviewed the financial documents and suggested that Robert and Diana had lost nearly $750,000 to Vanessa's schemes. "What do you want to do with all this?" Elaine finally asked. Melissa stared out her apartment window at the Seattle skyline. "I want my family back," she said quietly. "Not Vanessa, she's beyond redemption. But my parents deserve to know what she's done, that I was telling the truth. And James. God, James lost 12 years with me because of her lies. Are you ready for what happens if they don't believe you?" Again, Elaine's concern was evident. Melissa nodded slowly. "I've lived 12 years with their rejection. I can handle it if nothing changes. But I can't live with not trying, not now that I have proof." After another week of preparation, Melissa submitted her resignation at the firm, taking a leave of absence rather than leaving permanently. She sublet her apartment, packed 2 suitcases, and booked a one-way ticket to Chicago. Before leaving, she sent copies of all the evidence to her parents' home address with a simple note, "I'll be in Chicago on April 15th. I hope we can talk." No response came, but Melissa flew anyway, renting a car at O'Hare and checking into a hotel downtown. For 3 days, she called her parents' house repeatedly. No one answered. On the 4th day, she drove to their neighborhood parking, a block away from the familiar colonial-style home where she'd grown up. As she sat in the rental car gathering courage, her phone rang with an unknown Chicago number. "Melissa." The male voice was hesitant, older than she remembered, but unmistakable. "Dad," she clutched the phone tighter. "We got your package," Robert said, his voice breaking slightly. "Your mother and we've been trying to process everything. Can you come to the house now? Is Vanessa there?" Melissa asked, her heart pounding. "No, she doesn't know you've contacted us. We need to talk to you first." 20 minutes later, Melissa stood on her parents' doorstep, the April wind whipping her hair as she rang the bell. The door opened to reveal her father, now stooped with age, his hair completely gray. Behind him stood Diana, thinner than Melissa, remembered her face lined with years of worry. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Diana stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "My baby," she whispered, pulling Melissa into an embrace that broke 12 years of silence. "I'm so sorry we didn't believe you." Diana's embrace felt both foreign and achingly familiar. The scent of her Chanel perfume, unchanged after all these years, triggered a cascade of memories, bedtime stories, Sunday brunches, Christmas mornings, before everything shattered. Melissa stiffened initially, the hurt too ingrained to immediately dissolve, but then surrendered to the moment, her own tears falling freely. Robert stood awkwardly to the side, his hands trembling slightly, an effect of the stroke, Melissa realized. When Diana finally released her, he cleared his throat. "Come inside," he said gruffly, emotion making his voice hoarse. Before the neighbors see. Even now appearances mattered, Melissa noted with a pang. Some things never changed. The house's interior looked smaller than she remembered, though little had been updated. The same formal furniture, the same family portraits lining the hallway, except Melissa was absent from the newer ones, her existence neatly cropped from family history. She paused at a large silver-framed photo of Vanessa in a wedding gown beside James, her parents beaming on either side. That was a difficult day, Diana said softly, following Melissa's gaze. James looked haunted throughout the ceremony. I told myself it was just nerves. Please sit, Robert gestured to the living room. We have a lot to discuss. For the next hour, the three Carters engaged in the most painful conversation of their lives. Robert and Diana had spent the weeks since receiving Melissa's package examining the evidence, confronting long-ignored suspicions, and reassessing 12 years of family history through a devastating new lens. The financial records were what convinced me first, Robert admitted, his lawyer's mind still sharp despite his health. I've been concerned about our accounts for years, but Vanessa always had explanations. Business ventures, market downturns, unexpected taxes. She has access to everything, Diana added. Our accounts, medical records, even our email. She insisted it was to help us as we got older. Melissa listened, her heart breaking anew at how thoroughly her sister had manipulated their aging parents. When did you start having doubts about her? Diana and Robert exchanged glances. There have been small things over the years, Diana said carefully. Inconsistencies in her stories. Money that disappeared with vague explanations. The way she isolates us from friends who ask too many questions. The children, Robert added more forcefully. Emma and Liam. She's not right with them. What do you mean, Melissa asked, alarmed. She uses them as props when it suits her, perfect family photos for social media, school events where she plays supermom. But at home, Diana trailed off, visibly distressed. She's cold, controlling, Robert continued, especially with Emma. That's what led to the school mandating the psychological evaluation in the file you sent. Emma's teacher reported concerning behaviors, anxiety, compulsive lying. When they evaluated Emma, they requested Vanessa be assessed as well. Melissa absorbed this information, thinking about the niece and nephew she'd never met. And James, where does he stand in all this? Another glance between her parents. They're separated, Diana said. 3 months now. James moved out after a particularly bad fight. Vanessa told everyone it's temporary, that he's working through a midlife crisis. She's turned the children against him, Robert added grimly. Tells them he abandoned them, that he doesn't want to see them. In reality, she manipulates every visitation, creates conflicts, then documents everything for what she calls her divorce insurance. Does James know about the evidence? About me contacting you? Melissa asked, her voice catching slightly at the mention of her former fiancé. No, Robert shook his head. We haven't told anyone we've heard from you. We weren't sure. We didn't know if you'd actually come. The unspoken question hung in the air. After 12 years of rejection, why would Melissa want to reconnect? What could possibly heal such a profound breach of trust? I almost didn't, Melissa admitted. But I needed you to know the truth. And when I learned about Dad's stroke, Mom's anxiety, she paused, gathering courage for what she needed to say next. You chose Vanessa over me. You believed the worst about me without question. That broke something in me that I'm not sure can ever be fully repaired. Diana sobbed quietly. Robert's eyes glistened with unshed tears. But you're still my parents, Melissa continued. And it sounds like you're victims too. Different kind of victims, but still trapped in Vanessa's web. I want to help if you'll let me. What can we possibly do? Diana asked, despair evident in her voice. If we confront Vanessa with this evidence, she'll deny everything. She'll cut us off from the grandchildren. She might even press charges for slander or harassment. She's threatened that before when we've questioned her stories. And she still has control of most of our finances, Robert added. We're not destitute, but she's positioned herself as an essential signer on our primary accounts. Legally, it's complicated. Melissa leaned forward, a plan forming. That's why we need to be strategic. First, you need new accounts. She can't access new phones, new email addresses. Then we approach James. I think he'll be a crucial ally. And finally, we gather more current evidence. You sound so confident, Diana marveled, studying the daughter she'd lost. You've changed. 12 years of rebuilding yourself from scratch will do that, Melissa replied, without bitterness. I had to become stronger than what broke me. As they continued discussing next steps, the distinctive sound of tires on the driveway gravel interrupted their conversation. Diana paled, glancing at the ornate grandfather clock in the corner. That's Vanessa. She always brings the children on Friday afternoons. Panic flashed across Robert's face. She can't find you here. Not yet. It would ruin everything. Melissa felt a flash of the old pain still hiding, still accommodating her sister's chaos, but nodded in understanding. This wasn't the moment for a dramatic confrontation. Is there another way out? The basement door leads to the backyard, Robert said, already rising with unexpected energy. You can cut through the Hendersons' yard to the next street. As she gathered her purse, Diana grabbed her arm. Will you come back? Now that we've started this, Melissa looked into her mother's pleading eyes. Yes, but not here. It's too risky. I'm staying at the Wyndham downtown, room 1422. Come tomorrow morning. She heard the front door open, Vanessa's voice calling out, Mom, Dad, why is there a rental car down the street, as she slipped down the basement stairs? Heart-pounding, Melissa exited through the basement door and crept along the side of the house. She paused at the corner, unable to resist looking through the kitchen window. There stood Vanessa, still beautiful at 32, her hair expertly highlighted, designer clothes immaculate, ushering two children into the house. The girl around 10 had James's thoughtful eyes. The younger boy clutched a tablet, his expression guarded. Behind them came James himself, looking older, wearier than Melissa remembered, but still achingly familiar. I thought you weren't coming, Vanessa was saying to him, her voice carrying through the partially open window. Changed your mind about family time? Emma left her inhaler at my apartment, James replied flatly. I'm just dropping it off. For one breathtaking moment, James looked up and directly toward the window where Melissa stood watching. She ducked quickly, unsure if he'd seen her, and hurried across the yard. As Melissa reached her rental car and pulled away from her childhood neighborhood, her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Was that you? At your parents' house just now? Please tell me I'm not hallucinating. Jay. Before she could even wonder how he'd gotten her number, a second text arrived. Your father slipped me your contact info last week after they received your package. We need to talk. Meet me at Lakeside Park near the old bandstand, 7 p.m. tonight. Melissa stared at the message, her heart racing. After 12 years, the carefully constructed walls around her past were not just cracking, they were crumbling completely. Hey everyone, can you believe how quickly this family drama is unfolding? I'm on the edge of my seat writing this, and I hope you're feeling the tension too. If you're enjoying the story so far, please take a second to hit that like button. It really helps the algorithm show my content to more people who love these complex family stories. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Things are about to get even more intense as Melissa confronts her past. Now let's see what happens when she finally comes face to face with James after all these years. Lakeside Park held too many memories. It was where James had proposed on a perfect autumn evening, where they'd planned their future together on countless walks where Melissa had once believed in forever. Now, as she approached the weathered bandstand at 6:55 p.m., Each step felt weighted with 12 years of silence and unanswered questions. James was already there, pacing nervously, looking both familiar and like a stranger. His dark hair now had strands of silver at the temples, laugh lines had deepened around his eyes, but his tall frame and the way he moved were unchanged. He wore no wedding ring, she noticed immediately. He saw her and froze mid-step. For a long moment neither spoke. "You cut your hair," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. Melissa touched her shoulder-length bob self-consciously. "A long time ago." Another silence stretched between them, years of unspoken words creating an almost physical barrier. "I didn't know," James blurted suddenly. "About the messages, the pregnancy, lie, any of it?" "I swear to God, Melissa, I didn't know until your father showed me the evidence last week." "But you married her," Melissa said quietly, the hurt still raw even after all this time. James sank onto a bench, his shoulders slumping. "I did. God help me, I did." He looked up, his eyes pleading for understanding. "After you left, Vanessa was relentless. She was at your parents' house constantly playing the victim, spinning stories about your instability. She said you'd had episodes before, that the family had protected you. And you believed that." Melissa remained standing, unwilling to sit beside him yet. "I didn't want to. But your parents confirmed everything she said. They showed me emails you'd supposedly sent, disturbing, threatening. Then came the pregnancy announcement." "There was never a baby," Melissa said flatly. "I know that now," James replied, his voice hollow. "But then, God, Mel, I was lost. My fiancé had vanished, her family was telling me she was mentally ill, and suddenly there was a pregnancy. Your father said I had responsibilities to face, so you married my sister." Melissa couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. James nodded, looking down at his hands. 14 months later, the miscarriage happened first, conveniently, after I'd already been folded into the family business. By then, I was trapped working for your father, living 3 blocks away, with Vanessa controlling the narrative. For 12 years, James. I know. He stood suddenly, moving toward her but stopping when she took a step back. About 5 years in, I started having serious doubts. Things didn't add up. Vanessa's behavior with Emma after she was born. It was concerning. Cold, then smotheringly attentive when others were watching. "Why didn't you leave?" "The children," he said simply. "I couldn't leave them alone with her. And every time I suggested anything was wrong, Vanessa would threaten to take full custody, to tell the courts I was abusive. She had your father's legal connections, evidence she'd fabricated over years. I believed her threats." "But you've separated now," Melissa stated, recalling what her parents had told her. James nodded. 3 months ago, after Emma's school mandated psychological evaluations, I finally had external documentation of Vanessa's behavior. It gave me enough leverage to move out without her following through on her custody threats. But it's a delicate standoff." Melissa finally sat down on the bench, maintaining distance between them. "I built a whole new life, James. In Seattle. I changed my name to Quinn." "I know. I looked for you," he admitted. "After the first year, when things with Vanessa started showing cracks, I tried to find you. But you disappeared completely." "That was the point," Melissa said. "I couldn't bear knowing you were with her." Another silence fell, this one less tense, but filled with shared regret for years lost. "What happens now?" James finally asked. "Your parents are terrified of confronting Vanessa directly. She's threatened to block access to the grandchildren before when they've questioned her. And she still controls most of their finances." "We need a coordinated approach," Melissa said, slipping into the strategic thinking that had made her successful professionally, legally, financially, and psychologically. Vanessa needs to be exposed in a way that leaves her no room to manipulate or threaten anyone." "You sound so different," James observed. "So certain." "I had to become different to survive." Melissa replied. What about you, James? Are you ready to take a stand against her? Really ready, because once we start this, there's no going back. For Emma and Liam, absolutely. His expression hardened. They deserve better than growing up with her manipulation. Emma is already showing signs of anxiety and depression. Liam barely speaks around his mother. And for yourself, Melissa pressed. Are you ready to face the truth that you chose wrong? That you married a woman who systematically destroyed my life? James flinched but held her gaze. Yes, he said quietly. I've been living with that knowledge for years, even before I had proof. I just didn't have the courage to act on it. Melissa nodded, satisfied with his answer. We'll need to move quickly. Vanessa already knows something's happening. She saw the rental car today. How much access does she have to your communications? Phone, email, financial records? None anymore. That was the first thing I did when I moved out. New accounts, new phone, new email. I've been documenting everything for potential custody proceedings. Good, that gives us an advantage. Melissa pulled out her phone. I'm going to text you my hotel information. My parents are coming tomorrow morning at 10. Can you join us? Bring whatever documentation you have of Vanessa's behavior, especially anything related to the children or financial manipulation. I'll be there, James promised. As they finalized plans, a light rain began to fall. James offered Melissa his jacket, automatically a gesture so reminiscent of their past that it made her chest ache. Keep it, she said, standing to leave. I'm not the same person who needed your protection, James. I know, he said softly. But I'd like the chance to know who you've become. Melissa studied him for a long moment. Let's focus on dealing with Vanessa first. There will be time for everything else afterward, if we want there to be. As she walked away, James called after her. Melissa, for what it's worth, I never stopped loving you. Not really. I just convinced myself you were someone you never were. She didn't turn back, but his words followed her to the car, where she finally allowed herself to cry for the first time since arriving in Chicago, not from pain but from the complicated relief of finally being seen for who she truly was. The next morning, Melissa prepared her hotel suite for what would essentially be a war council. She ordered a large breakfast spread, arranged extra seating, and created a secure digital folder where they could compile all evidence against Vanessa. Robert and Diana arrived first, looking nervous but determined. Diana had brought additional financial records she'd managed to secretly copy from Robert's home office. These show transfers to accounts we never authorized, she explained. Almost $300,000 over the past 5 years alone. James arrived 30 minutes later with a thick folder of documents and a flash drive. Therapy reports for Emma, recordings of Vanessa's threats, text messages where she admits to lying about visitations, he explained. I've been building a case for months. As they reviewed everything together, a comprehensive picture of Vanessa's manipulation emerged: financial exploitation of her parents, psychological abuse of her children, and a web of lies that had ensnared the entire family for over a decade. We need legal protection before confronting her, Robert concluded. Restraining orders for all of us, including the children. Financial injunctions. And evidence solid enough that she can't twist it. I have a lawyer in Seattle who specializes in cases like this, Melissa offered. She can coordinate with someone local. But there's another issue we need to address. She took a deep breath. The children. How do we protect them when everything breaks open? The room fell silent as they contemplated the innocent victims in Vanessa's schemes. Emma already knows something is wrong, James said quietly. She asks questions about family history that Vanessa refuses to answer. She found old photos of you once, Melissa, and asked who you were. What did Vanessa say? Melissa asked. That you were a disturbed relative who had threatened the family and had to be kept away, James replied grimly. Emma didn't believe her. She's perceptive. Too perceptive for Vanessa's comfort, which is part of why Vanessa is so controlling with her. As the morning turned to afternoon, they formulated a comprehensive plan. Financial protections, first, legal documentation, second, and finally, a carefully orchestrated confrontation that would leave Vanessa no room to manipulate or threaten anyone. It will take about 2 weeks to put everything in place, Melissa concluded. Can we all maintain normalcy until then? Vanessa can't suspect what's coming. Everyone nodded in solemn agreement, the weight of what lay ahead hanging heavy in the room. As they prepared to leave, Diana hugged Melissa tightly. I never thought we'd have a chance to make this right, she whispered. Thank you for being stronger than our mistakes. Melissa returned the embrace, feeling something broken beginning to heal, however imperfectly. 2 weeks, she reminded everyone. Then we take back our family. The next 14 days passed in a carefully choreographed dance of preparation and pretense. While maintaining a facade of normalcy with Vanessa, each member of the plan executed their assigned tasks with precision. Robert, working with Melissa's Seattle attorney, quietly transferred funds to new accounts Vanessa couldn't access and documented years of unauthorized financial movements. Diana gathered medical records showing the progression of her anxiety disorder and Robert's stroke, both exacerbated by Vanessa's manipulative behavior. James compiled a devastating dossier of Vanessa's parental failings, including testimony from Emma's therapist about the psychological impact of her mother's behavior. Melissa, operating from her hotel room command center, coordinated everything while remaining invisible to Vanessa. She'd extended her leave of absence from the Seattle firm and rented a small apartment in downtown Chicago as a more permanent base of operations. On day 12, there was a close call. Vanessa showed up unexpectedly at her parents' house while Melissa was there. Only Robert's quick thinking sending Melissa out through the garage while distracting Vanessa with questions about the children prevented a premature confrontation. She's suspicious, Robert reported afterward. She kept asking about our finances, why we've been secretive lately. We're almost ready, Melissa assured him. Just 2 more days. The legal machinery was now in place, temporary restraining orders ready to be activated, financial injunctions prepared, custody documents drawn up for James. A family court judge had been briefed confidentially, thanks to connections from Melissa's attorney. Even the children had been subtly prepared by James, who had taken them to a specialized therapist trained in helping children navigate family trauma. On the morning of day 14, execution day, Melissa woke early, a strange calm settling over her. Today would change everything, for better or worse. There was no turning back. The plan called for Vanessa to be summoned to Robert and Diana's house for what she would believe was a family meeting about Robert's health. James would arrive with the children, who would immediately be taken upstairs by a child psychologist James had arranged to be present. Then, with everyone in position and the children safely out of the conflict zone, they would present Vanessa with the evidence of her deceptions and the legal consequences already in motion. Melissa arrived at her parents' house at 9 a.m., 2 hours before Vanessa was expected. Diana was nervously arranging and rearranging coffee cups. Robert sat stoically in his study, reviewing documents one final time. Are you both ready for this? Melissa asked them. Diana's hands trembled slightly. I keep thinking of her as a little girl. How did we miss what she was becoming? Narcissists are expert manipulators, Melissa said gently. And she's your daughter. You wanted to believe the best of her. While believing the worst of you, Robert added grimly. I'll never forgive myself for that. Today isn't about forgiveness, Melissa reminded them. It's about truth and protection for you, for the children, for all of us. At 1030, James arrived with Emma and Liam. The children were quiet, sensing the tension. Emma, with her serious eyes so like James's, studied Melissa curiously. Are you our aunt? She asked directly. The one in the old pictures. Melissa knelt to the girl's level. Yes, I am. It's very nice to meet you, Emma. Mom says you're dangerous, the child stated matter-of-factly. But Dad says Mom doesn't always tell the truth. That's one of the complicated things we're going to talk about today, Melissa replied carefully. But I promise I'm not dangerous. The child psychologist, Dr. Martinez, arrived minutes later and gently led the children upstairs to play games and talk well away from the coming confrontation. At precisely 11 a.m., the doorbell rang. Diana flinched at the sound. Robert straightened his shoulders. James moved to stand beside Melissa, a united front. Remember, Melissa said quietly. No matter what she says, no matter how she tries to twist things, we have the truth documented. Stay calm and stick to the facts. Robert opened the door. Vanessa stood on the threshold immaculately dressed in an expensive cream suit, her smile faltering as she registered the tension in the room and then freezing completely as her gaze landed on Melissa. What is she doing here? Vanessa's voice was ice cold, her body rigid. Where are my children? The children are upstairs with Dr. Martinez, James said calmly. They're fine, Vanessa. Please come in and sit down. We need to talk. I'm not sitting anywhere with her, Vanessa spat, pointing at Melissa. After what I did, Melissa interrupted, her voice steady. We know everything, Vanessa. The fake messages from James's phone. The pregnancy that never existed. The financial exploitation of Mom and Dad. The psychological abuse of your children. All of it. Vanessa's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, fury, calculation, and finally a cold smile. I don't know what lies she's been telling you, she said to her parents, but this is exactly why we cut her out of our lives before. She's clearly unstable, making these wild accusations. We have proof, Robert cut in, his voice stronger than it had been in years. Documented, verifiable proof of everything Melissa just said. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Vanessa's perfect features. What are you talking about? What proof? James stepped forward, opening a laptop on the coffee table. Let's start with the fake pregnancy, he said quietly. We have the recording of you bragging to your friend about using a Google Images sonogram to trick your family. The color drained from Vanessa's face as her own voice filled the room. The sonogram was from Google Images. Can you believe they fell for that? Even James, supposed to be this brilliant lawyer, totally bought it. That's manipulated, Vanessa stammered. Someone altered that recording. Then there's the financial records. Robert continued, laying out documents on the table. $300,000, Vanessa. Transferred from our retirement accounts to shell companies you control. Did you think I wouldn't eventually notice? You needed that money for investments, Vanessa protested, desperation creeping into her voice. I was helping you manage your finances. And these, Diana said, her voice shaking as she placed a folder on the table. My medical records. My doctor has confirmed that my anxiety disorder was exacerbated by gaslighting and emotional manipulation. Your father's stroke followed directly after you convinced him he was developing dementia when he questioned missing funds. Vanessa's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape route for any sign of weakness in the united front before her. Finding none, her demeanor suddenly shifted. The panic vanished, replaced by cold calculation. Fine, she said, her voice eerily calm. You want to play it this way, James. If you think you're getting custody of my children, you're delusional. One call to the right people and I'll have them taken away so fast your head will spin. Mom, Dad, who do you think the nursing home will listen to when you're too old to care for yourselves? The daughter who's been here, or the one who abandoned the family? That won't work anymore, Melissa said quietly. The restraining order has already been filed. The financial injunctions are in place. And James has temporary full custody as of this morning, approved by Judge Watkins. Vanessa's face contorted with rage. You can't do this to me. This is my family. It's our family, Robert corrected firmly. All of us except you now. You've lost the right to be part of it. We've arranged for you to continue therapy, Diana added, her voice gentler. The narcissistic personality diagnosis, there are treatments, Vanessa. Not cures, but ways to manage the behaviors. If you commit to that, truly commit, there may be a way forward eventually. Supervised visitation with the children, James added. If you get help, real help. Vanessa looked from face to face, the full impact of her situation finally registering. Her carefully constructed world of manipulation and control was collapsing around her. For a brief moment, something like genuine emotion flickered in her eyes, perhaps the closest thing to remorse she was capable of feeling. Then, just as quickly, the mask slipped back into place. "You'll regret this," she said coldly. "All of you." She turned on her heel and stormed toward the door, only to find 2 police officers standing on the porch, summoned as part of the safety plan. "Miss Carter-Taylor," one officer said, "we're here to serve you with these papers and escort you from the premises." As Vanessa was led away, protest dying on her lips as she realized the futility of resistance, an unexpected sound broke the tension in the living room. Laughter. Diana's relieved, slightly hysterical laughter. 12 years, she gasped between breaths. 12 years of walking on eggshells, afraid of setting her off, afraid of losing the grandchildren, and it's over in 20 minutes. "The hard part is just beginning," James reminded her gently. "The children will need a lot of support, there will be legal battles, therapy, rebuilding." "But we'll do it together," Robert said, looking at Melissa with eyes full of regret and hope. "If you'll stay, that is." Melissa felt the weight of the moment, of 12 years of exile and rebuilding, of pain and resilience. "I'm not moving back permanently," she said, honestly. "I have a life in Seattle, a career I've worked hard to build. But I'll stay as long as it takes to make sure everyone is stable, and after that, we'll figure out a new kind of family connection." James stepped closer to her. "And us? Is there any chance for something, anything?" Melissa looked at this man she had once planned to marry, now a single father working to protect his children from their own mother. "I don't know," she said truthfully. "Too much has happened. But I'm open to finding out who we both are now, slowly." Later that evening, after the children had been told a simplified version of events, after tears and questions and reassurances, Melissa stood alone in her parents' backyard, looking up at the stars. The same stars she'd gazed at as a child, as a broken-hearted exile, and now as a woman who had reclaimed her truth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elaine in Seattle. "How did it go?" Melissa typed back. "Justice served. Family broken but healing. I'll tell you everything when I'm back." As she slipped the phone back into her pocket, she heard the back door open. Emma stepped out, still in her day clothes, despite the late hour. "Dad says you design buildings," the girl said, without preamble. "I do," Melissa replied, surprised. "Big ones in Seattle." "I want to build things too," Emma confided. "Mom says it's not feminine enough, but Dad says I can do whatever I want." "Your dad is right," Melissa said, feeling a sudden connection to this serious child. "You absolutely can." "Maybe I can show you some of my designs sometime," Emma nodded, then asked the question, clearly weighing on her mind, "Is my mom bad?" Melissa considered the complexity of the answer, the importance of honesty balanced with compassion. "Your mom is sick in a way that makes it hard for her to love people the way they need to be loved," she said carefully. "It doesn't make her bad, but it means she needs help, and it means you need protection while she gets that help." The child absorbed this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "Will you stay?" Dad smiles more since you came back. "I'll stay until things are settled," Melissa promised. "And after that, I'll visit often. You're my niece, and I'd like the chance to know you." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer and returned inside, leaving Melissa alone with the night sky and the profound understanding that karma had indeed come full circle. Vanessa had stolen Melissa's family for 12 years, but in the end, truth had prevailed. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in over a decade, it would be built on honesty rather than deception. 3 years later, Melissa stood at the arrivals gate of Seattle-Tacoma International Airport watching as passengers streamed through the doors. She spotted them immediately. Emma, now 13, and shooting up like a weed, her arms filled with architecture magazines. Liam, 9, and bouncing with excitement. Robert and Diana moving more slowly but looking healthier than they had in years. And James carrying the bulk of their luggage, his eyes searching until they found hers. Aunt Melissa. Emma called, rushing forward for a hug that nearly knocked Melissa off balance. The teenager had developed an interest in architecture that had created a special bond between them over the past 3 years. "Let me see the college brochures," Melissa said with a laugh. Though Emma was years from college, she was already collecting information from schools with strong architectural programs. "Got 5 new ones," Emma replied proudly. "MIT sent the best package." "My turn," Liam insisted, squeezing between them for his own hug. Where Emma was serious and focused, Liam was all energy and enthusiasm. Both children had flourished once freed from Vanessa's manipulative parenting. Melissa embraced her parents next. At 71, they had reclaimed their retirement, their finances secured, and their health improved. They'd sold the Chicago house, too many difficult memories, and bought a smaller condo that they actually enjoyed maintaining. James was last, his hug lingering just a moment longer than the others. Their relationship had evolved carefully over the past 3 years, friendship deepening into something more complex, but still undefined. Neither rushed, both aware of the complicated history between them. "Welcome to Seattle," Melissa said to the group. "I hope you're ready for a real Carter Quinn family Thanksgiving." The journey from the airport to Melissa's home was filled with excited chatter. Emma shared her latest design project, Liam described his soccer team's championship game, and Robert and Diana compared Seattle's skyline to Chicago's. James was quieter, occasionally catching Melissa's eye in the rearview mirror with a smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. Melissa's house, a modern structure overlooking Puget Sound that she had designed herself, welcomed them with warm lights against the November chill. Inside, her colleague and friend Elaine was putting final touches on the Thanksgiving table. "Perfect timing," Elaine announced. "Turkey needs 15 more minutes. Kids, I've got hot chocolate in the kitchen." As everyone settled in, Melissa took a moment to absorb the scene, her family broken and scattered for so long, now reunited in her home. It hadn't been easy getting here. The first year after the confrontation had been the hardest. Vanessa had fought the custody arrangement, the financial consequences, every boundary they'd established. But faced with overwhelming evidence and united opposition, her attempts had ultimately failed. She had eventually moved to California, maintaining limited supervised contact with the children and continuing therapy that showed minimal but real progress. The children had needed intensive support to process their mother's behavior and absence. Emma particularly had struggled with guilt and confusion before finding her footing. Liam's nightmares had taken months to subside. James had balanced single fatherhood with rebuilding his legal career outside his former father-in-law's firm. Melissa had split her time between Seattle and Chicago for the first year, helping stabilize everyone before gradually returning to her own life. Her architectural firm had been understanding, even opening a small Chicago satellite office that allowed her to take on Midwest projects when visiting family. Now 3 years later, they had found a new equilibrium. Not perfect, there were still difficult moments, missed connections, the occasional reopening of old wounds, but stable and increasingly joyful. As they gathered around the Thanksgiving table, Robert raised his glass in a toast. To family, he said simply, "Lost and found." And to truth, Diana added, her eyes meeting Melissa's, which always finds its way to the surface eventually. And to new beginnings, James said quietly, his gaze lingering on Melissa. Later, after dinner had been cleared and the children were showing their grandparents something on the laptop, James joined Melissa on the deck overlooking the Sound. The November air was crisp, the water reflecting city lights like scattered stars. "I've been offered a position with a Seattle firm," he said, without preamble. "Environmental law. They're impressed with the pro bono work I've been doing in Chicago." Melissa turned to him surprised. "You're moving to Seattle, considering it," he replied carefully. "Emma loves it here, has been talking about the science magnet school. Liam adapts anywhere. But," he hesitated, "it depends on other factors too." Like what Melissa asked, though she knew the answer. "Like whether there's a chance for us," James said, finally giving voice to what had been growing between them. "I know we can never go back, never erase what happened. But maybe we can go forward if you want that too." Melissa looked out at the water, thinking of all they'd been through, the betrayal, the lost years, the painful reconciliation, and the careful rebuilding of trust. She thought of the scared, broken-hearted woman who had fled Chicago 12 years ago and the stronger, wiser person she had become. "I'd like to try," she said, simply reaching for his hand. "Slowly, on new terms as the people we are now." James nodded, understanding the boundaries and the promise in her words. "That's all I can ask for." Inside, they could hear Liam laughing at something, Emma's voice explaining some architectural concept to her grandparents, the sounds of a family healed by truth and time. Karma had come full circle, transforming betrayal into redemption, exile into homecoming. Melissa leaned against the railing, James beside her, both looking out at the future, unfolding before them, uncertain but full of possibilities they once thought lost forever. Wow, what a journey this story has been! If you've made it to the end with me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced or witnessed family betrayal that eventually led to justice? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below and let's discuss these complicated family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to my channel for more real-life inspired stories about family drama, healing, and redemption. Your support means everything and helps me continue creating content that explores these complex human relationships. Thank you so much for listening to my family revenge story. Remember that sometimes the path to healing isn't about getting even, but about reclaiming your truth and finding peace on your own terms. Until next time, take care of yourselves and cherish the authentic relationships in your life.